And into our chaos, I bring someone distinguished. He's probably already second-guessing his decision to agree to be here. But this is a guy who is the chairman and CEO of Saybrook Management. It's a private investment firm dedicated to innovative transportation and logistics solutions. Logistics is that stuff of the supply chain. When ships come to port, when they're unloaded, when they put stuff into trucks, when those trucks move that stuff to another place, that is transportation and logistics. This guy is the CEO of this firm dedicated to finding new, innovative ways to do that. He has been involved in deploying, operating, managing billions in assets across the world and 100+ platform companies. He's been called upon by our U.S. government and by governments worldwide to consult. He was appointed by the U.S. Department of Transportation Secretary to the Marine Transportation System National Advisory Committee. I'd love to talk to him about the world of government and how government works. I'm guessing it doesn't work very well. He spent a lot of time in Washington trying to advise how to get things moving and how to make things more efficient when it comes to logistics and delivery. But we may have to table that for another time because right now there's a crisis building in the way of these ports on the West Coast, which, as I've told you, have been shut down in pockets over the last few days over a labor strike. Please welcome very special guest, Jonathan Rosenthal, everyone. Jonathan, thank you, sir.
Quite the intro, Mark. Quite the intro. My God.
I skipped over a lot of stuff, honestly. I could have made it even more flowery. Yeah.
I mean, let's be serious here. Mozart was dead 30 years by the time he was my age.
Yeah, well, you may see yourself as an underachiever, but I am quite impressed. Now, can we first talk about what's happening with these West Coast ports? What is the state of the state there as you understand it?
Look, this has been going on for quite a while. This is typical labor negotiations. They come up every 3 years or 6 years, depending on the on the contract term. So this is the longshoremen, ILWU, International Longshoremen and Warehouse Workers. They are the dominant union representing dock workers along the West Coast. That's all the way from Seattle, Oakland, Port Hueneme up in Oxnard, and LA and Long Beach. My recollection is they have about 38,000 members internationally, and they're very powerful. And so these are labor negotiations. I think we in the industry saw this coming. You probably read about the record profits that the shipping lines made during the pandemic. Just for your listeners, we used to pay about $1,800 from Asia to the West Coast for a container. That price went up above $20,000.
Wow!
And keep in mind that the cost of shipping, the ship itself, the fuel, the people on the ship, that didn't really go up by 10 times. So there were record profits by the shipping lines.
And let me just understand this, Jonathan. That was to take advantage of, this is during the pandemic, the clear interruption in that supply chain?
Yes. So it was, the system is very, very fragile, Mark. It's very fragile. And this is something that we've been preaching now for more than a decade. And it's fragile because of the information systems. It's fragile because it's a highly complex ballet. Think about it, right? You got thousands and thousands of people that want to ship. You've got lots and lots of different, what I think of as nodes in a giant network. Those nodes are things like trucking companies, warehouses, rail, thousands and thousands of these nodes. Every one of those nodes has its own software operating system. Now, 100 years ago, that didn't happen. Today, it does. You cannot run a yard, you cannot run a terminal, you cannot run a trucking company without a software operating system. It tells you kind of what to do. How do you manage a warehouse? Our warehouses, we manage 5.5 million square feet of warehouse. We have 11 distribution centers in any one building. We have 4 million SKUs. How the hell do you do that? I can't remember where shit is. So, you got to do what you got to do. So those are all independent operating systems. They are not.
So let me understand that you're not all operating on the same system. Is what independent operating systems means.
In fact, Mark, it's so screwed up that not only are you not operating on the same system, you're not operating with the same language. So those systems are not interoperative. So the system that runs a terminal where the boat lands and where the container is unloaded, that has a terminal operating system. We have 12 terminals in LA and Long Beach. We have 11 separate operating systems. Those operating systems, you'd love it if that operating system could communicate with the trucking company that's coming to pick up the container. Can't do it. How about the warehouse? You're shipping out a container. Wouldn't you like to know? Wouldn't you like the warehouse to know, hey, we're sending you a container. You better get ready to receive it. Doesn't exist. Okay, so this is a highly fragmented system. So actually, we're selling all of our, what I would think of as functional logistics. We own 6 trucking companies. We own port container distribution. We own lots of things like that. We're selling all of that. We're redeploying it because technology has now gotten to a point, particularly with artificial intelligence, where it is going to be a sea change. The union gets it. They understand that technology is going to be hugely disruptive. And who is it going to be disruptive to? Labor. We can run a port today with existing technology without any people.
Wow.
Think about
how is well, I am thinking about it. How is that possible?
Yeah. So the technology exists today that you can sail a ship from Asia to the US without any people. That technology exists. Now, that hasn't been deployed yet, but it exists. You can land that ship at a terminal on a dock autonomously. You can unload that ship, unload its containers. And keep in mind, you're talking about 20,000 containers. These are big ships. You can do that autonomously. There are automated ports today. Even in LA, we have a couple of automated terminals, but the union gets it. You go from an automated terminal has about 50 people. A non-automated terminal has about 500. So the union says, well, we're getting screwed here. We better make hay while the sun shines, because they understand that this is very disruptive. Now, I find this interesting for a whole bunch of reasons, not least of which is this is the dawn of a new age. And we've all been talking about it, about AI and the implications of AI and the implications of autonomous vehicles and all that stuff. Okay, here it is. What are we going to do? Now, tell me when in history somebody's been able to hold back technology. Can you slow it down? Can you keep your job a little longer? Sure, that happens. It was, think about containerization, right? Containerization changed the world. The first container was invented in 1956 by a guy named Malcolm McLean. He invented the container.
Now, the container, again, is that thing, like those big Maersk things that we've seen.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. A container is a big metal box.
Okay.
Very, very cool idea. Changed the world. Why did it change the world? Because it reduced your transportation costs by 80%. 80%, right? Because what used to happen before a container? You'd take a truck, you drive the truck up on the dock, you dump out a bunch of stuff on the dock, 10% of it would get stolen. The other part would get stuffed into the hull of a ship, right? That's hugely inefficient, hugely labor intensive. So the invention of the container was 1956. The first container ship wasn't built until 1963, right? So it takes a long time for these these
Well,
ideas.
how much of that, this is a little history that you may or may not be significant, but how much of that was labor pushing back? I mean,
Oh,
in other words,
huge.
yeah, right. That's what I would think.
So listen to this. You'll love this. What was the compromise with labor? How did they get labor to finally go along? Now, labor fought this like crazy, right? But how did they get them to finally go along? They said to labor, hey, go home. Go home. You're 40 years old. We will pay you through retirement 100% of your salary and your full benefits. Just go home. That's how they did it. Now, I don't know what the answer is today.
Eerily, oddly, might that be instructive for this moment?
Of course. Yeah.
And so you're sort of implying some version of that is what they'll try to hatch to take care of.
It worked before. I know from my friends in the longshoremen. And look, these guys, they're hardworking guys, right? I mean, this is not simple work. And they have built these ports over, 100 years. So I sympathize with their angst over losing their jobs. But at least my friends at the longshoremen, they get it. Like, they're not telling their kids, hey, you should go be a longshoreman. That used to be the program. Like, your kid did it and your grandkid did it. And, you pass these jobs on because they were very, very good jobs. But they're not doing that today. And I think they're not doing that today in the same way that they did before, because they realize that it's a melting ice cube. The technology. Now, is that fair? Is it good? Is it socially the right thing to do? Who knows? I mean, every time, when the guy first invented a tractor, people complained that, oh, you're going to kill jobs because you got people with shovels, right? But I don't know. I cannot think of a time, and Mark, you know me. I study innovation. For my whole life, I've studied innovation, and there's not a single example where technology has been able to, where someone has been able to thwart technology. The technology wins.
So there may be a moment here where they can stave off that technology or divert it or delay it in some way, but ultimately what you've described is the course that will be followed and the narrative that we'll see. Yeah.
Here's an interesting stat for you. This is not happening, by the way, in other ports in other countries. Places like Singapore, the ports in China, in Rotterdam, places like that, they're automating. They're not dealing with the unions. They're not dealing with labor issues. They're saying this is far more efficient, and there's no question that the technology is more efficient. So they're not messing around. In the US, we have a very different political dynamic. And I fault the elected officials because they don't have the balls to step up and take the heat. And it's a lot of heat. There's no question it's a lot.
So what does that mean, the heat? What is it? Is it threats to family, or is it political threats? No. Okay, so threat. I'm just giving you the spectrum. Yeah. Or is it political money and loss of political power? What are the threats?
Well, it's I don't think it's so much money, but the union, as you've seen, can slow down the port, right? They can do it if they want to do it. That's what's happening now. Yeah, that's exactly, and that causes a headline, and that headline, when you've got 100 ships offshore and you got helicopters and ABC News flying over and showing all these ships, so the mayor looks like a bonehead.
I see.
Right, so they're freaked out. The governor didn't want that. He didn't want those headlines. So that's part of it. Part of it is, I think the unions generally, I think this is generally true in today's world. I think the unions have in my opinion, they have a disproportionate voice. But if you're a union person, I guess you'd say they don't have enough of a voice. There's certainly a role for unions.
But it's interesting. Thank you, though, for putting some specifics on it. There's such a political imperative to stop the bleeding that you're ready to do whatever to take care of that port situation. And that is a little bit of what we're dealing with now, even
That's
though
right.
you may know that it's inevitable that this technology is going to take over. You have to somehow take care of this the stoppage at the ports.
But there's a price, Mark. There's a
Yeah.
huge price that you're paying. 42% of all imports in the U.S. come through the port of LA or Long Beach. So when you slow things down, that manufacturer that's waiting for a part in Chicago, he sends everybody home, right? He doesn't have that widget that he needs to build the car or do whatever he's going to do. Now, here's an interesting stat for you. The World Bank, fairly reputable, the World Bank does a study of port efficiency. I think they rate 351 ports globally, all through Africa, Asia, Europe. They rate the ports on efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
This year, this is going to blow your mind. This year, the Port of LA and Long Beach, where did they rank? 351. Where do you think they rank?
Oh, toward the bottom, apparently. I mean, with that ramp up, right?
350 and 351.
Wow. That's
So
shocking.
Shocking.
It's shocking because we always think of ourselves, and it's the myth of American exceptionalism.
By the way, we invented the technology. The technology that solves this problem was invented here, right? I mean, this is an area of science that I love, and you and I have talked about it a bit. Look, it's called location intelligence, right? This
is a great bit. Just to explain in our last minute or so how, because this is crazy. You can locate your bag that's checked on your United flight. You can locate that bag, but somehow we don't have the same technology in place for these shipping containers.
It's like, in the logistics business, in supply chain, and I've done all kinds of logistics, airlines and all kinds of stuff. But in supply chain, the first question you ask is pretty simple. Where's my shit? That's what you're asking. Where's my stuff? The truth is, we can't tell you today. There are 30 million containers in the world, metal boxes, 30 million containers. How many of those 30 million containers do you think are connected to the internet, that actually have some connectivity and aren't just a dumb box? Zero. Virtually zero. Now that's going to all change because those boxes are going to be connected. We're working very closely with Cisco and with Intel, and we have a company here called Esri out in Riverside. This technology is available, and it was invented here in the U.S., but is not being deployed here in the U.S. And that's because there's no political will.
You can throw an air tag into each one of them, and you've got.
I get it. I get it.
It's crazy.
What people don't really understand is the least interesting question in logistics is, where's my stuff? Because when you ask the question, where's my stuff? It's too late. You're only asking the question because it's not where I need it. Right? So what you really want to ask is, why? Why isn't it where I need it to be when it needs to be there? So that's what we think of as predictive analytics. We want to know a week, 2 weeks in advance whether something is going to, whether my supply chain is going to be disrupted. And that's really what we're focused on. We're focused on the information technology that is available today, that can be deployed not just in supply chain, but in anything that moves.
That's a huge savings potentially, but you can see
think about the environmental impacts, Mark.
Sure,
environmental impacts are huge.
I love that you put some specifics on this overall problem, and you can see where the shoe pinches for labor. And this will be so. In our last 45 seconds, can you forecast what's going to happen at these ports, these West Coast ports? By the way, they've talked about now rerouting ships so that they don't even deal with the West Coast ports of the United States anymore.
Yeah, they've been doing this for a long time. We've lost about 20% market share on the West Coast. So, they get rerouted to places like Houston. But look, LA ports are not going to go away. Long Beach is not going to go away. We have huge infrastructure here. We have 1.8 billion square feet of warehouse in Southern California. We're the number one manufacturing center in the U.S. Because of the port. 1 out of 9 jobs in Southern California is related to the port. So they're not going to go away. The longshoremen do have enormous amounts of power, and there will be a resolution. I suspect the resolution will be a little bit along the lines that we talked about, which is, maybe, so it's
a slow process, it sounds like.
Yeah. How it gets resolved, I don't know, but it will get resolved ultimately. If not willingly, the feds will come in and have some sort of resolution. But it's unfortunate that this has to happen all the time.
Sure. And it's being asked now in the chat, and so I'll invite you back if you'll indulge us with another visit. What about the U.S. government? Has Mr. Rosenthal given his perspective of the U.S. government? The answer is yes, but I don't have time to get into further details. But will you come back?
Well, you don't want to see my head explode.
Yeah, when Mr. Rosenthal went to Washington, that is a great story for your for your next visit. Jonathan Rosenthal, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.